You need to check.
Just curious about whether
Are we on the record?
Yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the February 6th, 2025 Environmental Control Board meeting. Hope you're all doing well. It's our first meeting of calendar year. And I'd like to ask our parliamentarian to do a roll call to verify quorum.
Good morning, Commissioner Asim Rahman,
Present.
Shamanda Graham,
Present.
Joseph Gregory,
present.
Elizabeth Nauer, present, Madeline Ligori, present, Russell Cooney,
Present.
Arminder Paul Rana,
Present.
Matthew
Present.
Schneider,
Present.
Thomas Stetner,
Present.
Matthew Smith,
Present.
Douglas Swan, Lisa Urban, Jared Whittington.
Present.
We have quorum 11 out of 13.
Thank you. We have all participants who have noted themselves as present are here at 100 Church Street, with the exception of Arminder Paul Rana, who is joining us via video conference. First order of business is the minutes from the December 5th, 2024 meeting. I'd like to ask if anyone has any corrections to the minutes. Before I do that, there's one typographical correction that we actually noted. Is that right?
Yes, in the list of members who are present, there is a C missing from Matthew Schneider's name, so I agree.
Okay, so that's just a ministerial correction to a name. Any substantive comments or questions regarding the minutes?
Yeah, I have one.
Thank you, Tom.
That in the second to last paragraph on the second page, the answer I provided to Matthew with a C was that this came from City Hall, and it wasn't, the TLC part was really dicta and not substantively important to the question.
So that's the paragraph that starts, Matthew Schneider
Correct.
asked whether it was city council or the board that voted to make this shift. Does anyone have any, I'm sorry, so Tom, are you suggesting that we include that content?
No, I'm suggesting that content isn't dispositive to Matthew's question. It was City Hall. He asked about the board or city council, and I told him, no, it was, I thought city, my belief. I don't know if the exact words I used, but my belief that it was City Hall. And having TLC had no, I think, substantive input into that outcome.
Would you propose a particular line edit?
Sure. I would say Spetner responded that it was his belief that it was City Hall and not the city council.
City Hall and not city council, that, how would you continue that?
Period.
And delete everything up until now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so let me propose the following. Since that was all done on the record, would folks be okay if we, I'm going to suggest that we provisionally vote on adopting the minutes with Tom's proposed change, and then any other things that we add here, subject to the team just verifying that that matches the actual recording. If it does, we'll move it through. If it doesn't, we'll just revisit that.
Yeah, I don't have access to the recording yet, so I'm working from my best recollection.
Okay, great. Any other comments on the minutes? Okay, does anyone have any concerns with that plan that I just outlined? Okay, so I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to adopt the minutes with the change that Tom proposed. That is that the second sentence of said paragraph will read, Spetner responded that it was his belief that it was City Hall and not City Council, subject to the oath team checking that against the audio recording, in which case, if it matches, we'll adopt the minutes. If it doesn't, we'll revisit it at the next meeting. Okay, motion? Thank you, Tom. Second? Second for Matthew. All right, may we have a vote on the minutes, please?
Are there any objections to the motion adopting the minutes of the December 5th, 2024 ECB meeting? Seeing none, hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Okay, next, we have a cease and desist order from Russ Martinez from DEP. Russ?
All right, thank you. This month, DEP is asking the board to issue a cease and desist order for Grenadier Realty Management. This is for 3415 Neptune Avenue in Brooklyn. They have been cited on 3 occasions for excessive noise from a generator at the building. They were most recently found in violation in December. And based on the fact that we are continuing to get complaints, there does not appear to have been any correction in response to the 3 summonses that have been issued to date. So accordingly, the department is requesting that the board issue an order to respondent to cease and desist.
Does anyone have any questions? Elizabeth?
Do you know what the uses of the building and what the purpose of the generator is?
I'm sorry, Elizabeth?
Sorry, do you know what the use of the building is and what the purpose of the generator?
Actually, usually I do Google these buildings to find out what they are. I don't think I did for this one. I believe it's an apartment building of some kind. But I actually did not look this one up to see what it is.
Okay, so I mean, it's possible that the generator is providing electricity or heat or hot water.
I mean, this was going on through all of last year. So, I mean, the violations were in October of 23 and through September of last year. So this has been going on for almost a year. I don't know if the building would be using a generator for that period of time.
Is this an emergency generator?
It was just on the summonses, it's just identified as a generator. The inspectors just indicated that it's a generator and it's
Are generators considered by definition a circulation device?
it appears to be a rental apartment building. There are reviews for the apartments and it's in Coney Island. Yeah, so it appears to be a rental apartment building.
It's occupied, it's just, I would think.
Yeah, it's apparently been around for a while. There are news stories about from 10 years ago about an accident where a child fell out a window at the building, and so it's a existing rental apartment building apparently for at least 10 years.
Russ, do we know if the recent penalties have been paid? The hearing dates, the violations from September of 24 and December of 24.
The printouts indicate that for the most recent one, there apparently actually seems to be a balance due on all of them.
Okay.
The first one is still in default, but they did appear on the last 2, so they know about them.
We know what they said when they appeared. They appeared the last 2, usually have a defense of some sort.
It would, there's, if they had submitted appeals, it would show on Ticket Finder that that it had been referred to appeals, and it just says in violation.
And Elizabeth's question, again, there would be a cease and desist, but a direction to respond at a special
At a
hearing. So
hearing,
they
correct.
could, of course, at the special hearing, present if there's a need for the use despite the sound.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, the inspectors only appear to have referred to this equipment as a generator.
So my understanding was that an emergency generator at least wouldn't necessarily fall under the circulation device portion of the code, but would rather fall under the unreasonable noise section of the code. Is that not true in this case?
That would be, if that would be a defense for them to raise at a hearing if they felt that the wrong section was issued, and there's been 3 summonses, they defaulted on the first one and they've been found in violation on.
Okay, so they had their
and
chance
the
to
third
argue
one,
that.
So.
Is the remedy for them to pay the fine, or they need to?
No,
update
the remedy
generator?
is going to be for them to correct the condition. The fine payment is, as far as the cease and desist order is concerned, and the payment of the fine is something that's the collections issue. No, they do not comply with the cease and desist order by paying the fines, although they should obviously pay the fines. They comply with the cease and desist order by satisfying DEP and the hearing officer that they've corrected the violation.
Other questions, comments? Okay, I have a motion to vote on the cease and desist order. A motion from Joseph, the second from Madeline. Thank you. You please.
Are there any objections to the motion approving the cease and desist order? Seeing none, hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously.
All right, thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Before we move on to the next item, just thinking about the questions that some of you raised with Russ regarding the cease and desist order, and the types of questions that sometimes repeat themselves. I'm wondering, I also don't know if this is how feasible this is. That's a question for Russ. So I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to the board if the packets included, and maybe this could be mandatory, it could be discretionary, the copies of the both hearing officer decisions when there's a violation. Question was raised right now, did they have a chance to raise that defense?
Right.
And if we had a copy of the hearing officer decision, we could know what was raised. You can also probably get a sense, not in detail, but just a sense of, what do we think the respondents are doing here? Are they really being responsive, or are they just kind of not really making a strong case in which might warrant a cease and desist order? First, let me ask, is that something people might want to see? Yes.
I think it's a terrific idea. More information as we plow through these is great. It would probably, but I also have a caveat. I think you asked another good question, which is whether it's mandatory or discretionary. You probably should put it at the discretion of the agency and make it a very good to have and nice to have.
Yeah.
It just would maybe cut down on some of these pretty good questions, and seeing the record in another matter we're going to be talking about today kind of reinforces my thinking on this. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
But it's a great idea.
Elizabeth?
I agree. And I also just add that if in cases where there isn't a lot of information in the hearing decisions, or maybe they were all defaulted, so there are no hearing decisions. If Russ, I would greatly appreciate sort of like having any background information that you can.
Yeah, I
bring
think that's a
with you from the
problem. I think we
inspectors.
can include for any of them that have decisions.
Yeah.
Obviously, if they're not defaults or stipulations or whatever, if there are decisions, we can include those decisions, and we can also include some kind of background on the building and
Okay.
what it is and what it's used for,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Good. And so by including that, it goes without saying that that's an incremental amount of preparatory work that we will all need to do, reading that coming in. It sounds like everyone's comfortable with that. So, okay, Russ, let's
Yeah,
do that
that's fine.
going forward.
I don't see a
And,
problem with that.
Excellent. And if there are any concerns, just let us know. To Tom's point, the more information we have up front, the better. Good. Okay. Thanks, everyone. All right, we are now going to stick with DEP, and we have a presentation from Russ, who's going to educate us on the noise cameras that DEP has been using.
Briefly, I promise. Yeah, no, some questions had been raised and I had asked whether it would be beneficial for the board to have a brief sort of introduction to what's going on with these things, because it is a novel thing that this technology is now being used to enforce the noise code, in particular with regard to a section that it had never really been possible to enforce before. Because we weren't going to have inspectors standing around on the side of roads with noise meters waiting for noisy vehicles to go by. So this technology has now allowed the department to begin to enforce sections that have been in the code, but really have never been capable of regular enforcement before, despite the fact that they are the subject of a lot of complaints. So just one page basically of background. You have in the noise code section 236E, which states that no person shall cause or permit the total sound from a motor vehicle operating on any public right-of-way to exceed the sound level set forth in section 386 of the VTL. And in the vehicle and traffic law, subsection 3C, you have the prohibition on operating a motor vehicle on a public highway with a maximum gross weight of less than 10,000 pounds, which basically we're talking about cars, SUVs, that sort of thing, in such a manner as to exceed the sound level set forth in the table. And then I sort of, there is a little table, but because it would have taken up a lot of room, I sort of summarized what's in the table. And the table says that at a distance of 50 feet from the center of the lane in which the car is traveling, the allowable level is 76 decibels on roads where the speed limit is 35 or less. So that basically is going to be with the current city speed limits. Almost every road has a speed limit of 35 or less. So in the late teens, I think, sometime, enforcement with noise cameras began in London. And it was using technology that had been developed by a British company called Intelligent Instruments. And DEP became interested in this, and in 2021 began a pilot program at the beginning, not even issuing violations, but just using one of these rigs that we got from the UK as a pilot to sort of test it, see what was involved, what the results of it that it generated were. And in the meantime, at the state level, the state had enacted something called the Sleep Act. And one of the things that the Sleep Act did was to raise to $1,000 the penalty for vehicles that violated 386 of the VTL. At the time, our penalty for 236, which was something that we could never enforce, was $220. So keeping in mind the fact that we were testing this technology and that the state had just passed the Sleep Act, we amended the noise code penalty schedule to raise the penalty for a violation of 236E from 220 to 880, which was as high as we could make it, given the legal range in the noise code. And at the same time, the city council was starting to look at this, and they passed local law 7, which became effective at the beginning of 2024. And local law 7 added a new section to the noise code, 236.1, to establish parameters for a photo noise violation monitoring program, which was the very long title that they gave this section. And there were provisions in this pertaining to requirements for the calibration and the placement of the devices, for the handling of the evidence generated by the devices, in particular to address any privacy concerns. It states that the only thing that we can do with the evidence generated by these cameras is to use them as evidence at oath hearings for violations resulting from the evidence collected. It cannot be foiled. It can only be shared with anybody pursuant to a subpoena from a court in connection with a criminal case or investigation or something of that matter. And it also, the legislation also requires that by the end of September of this year, there be at least 5 of these cameras in each borough, which would be a total of at least 25 cameras. Currently, we have 9. The cameras cost about $20,000 a piece. And right now, because it says in the legislation in local law 7 that the cameras can be obtained subject to budgetary provisions. And OMB is telling us that right now they're not generating enough fines to justify getting the additional cameras, not because the fines are not being, the violations are not being issued and then fines are not being imposed, but because they're not being paid. The collection rate on these fines is terrible. People are ignoring the summonses. They're not paying the fines when they do show up. So the last slide will address that a little bit. So the next few slides are a presentation from the company in the UK concerning this equipment. And so you see that this is on the right-hand side of that slide. You can see what the gear kind of looks like. And there's a microphone and there's a camera. And this is all, really state-of-the-art kind of technology. So on the next slide, you see that there is on the left side, a precision microphone, a microphone array. The precision microphone basically takes the reading. The microphone array basically identifies which vehicle the noise is coming from. And then you have the cameras. And then there's a processor and a router that all of this goes through and gets processed by. And this is all kind of, self-explanatory. The gear is calibrated in the UK. Okay, the legislation, Local Law 7, requires that the equipment be calibrated by the manufacturer. So once a year, these will have to be boxed up and sent back to England to be calibrated by the manufacturer and then sent back over here with the proof of calibration. That's a requirement in Local Law 7. And then on the next slide, you can see the kind of what it generates. So on the photograph, on the lower right-hand side, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see that there is a red dot on one of the vehicles. And that is how this technology tells us which of the vehicles is generating the excessive sound. Is that a red dot appears on the vehicle that the sound is coming from.
Russ, it's worth mentioning on this company's website, they actually show the video of that, so you can see the red dot following the.
Yeah.
It's worth checking out.
Yeah, the red dot will follow the noisy vehicle down the road. Then there's sort of a blow up of one of these actually deployed in New York City. So now you know what these look like. If you see one of these things mounted on a pole, you know what it is. There's a DEP sticker on it, and you know where it is. The locations are being selected currently based on 311 calls. Wherever we're getting the most calls that there are a lot of really loud vehicles going by is where they're trying to deploy them. As I said, right now we have 9 of them. If OMB gives us the money, the legislation will require us to have at least 25 of them deployed by September.
Do you move them around?
Hmm?
Have you been moving them around?
Yes. Yes, they move around. People tend to learn where they are. So yes, we do move them around. We have had vehicles getting hit, the same vehicles getting hit over and over again. And we have, I think, the most one license plate has got hit so far has been like 11 or 12 times.
Well,
That's like bankruptcy level fines for that person.
Were there any education efforts for the public done by DEP? And I only ask that because I imagine that lay people don't necessarily know what level their music is supposed to be. Of course, you have those cars with, extra horsepower, I'll say. I have one in my neighborhood, 2 a.m. every morning, that starts up. But my point is, besides the violation, does the public know? And how would they know to keep their vehicles at a certain level? What about people who simply travel with very loud music and they may have been doing this their whole lives?
Yeah, I really don't know what we've done in terms of any kind of a campaign or anything like that. Given that right now there are only 9 cameras.
Is it basically, you have to have souped up your car or motorcycle for it to pick you up? I recall we had a case where someone claimed they had a factory car. It was admittedly a sports car of some sort, and they got a fine, and it was, out of the box, quote unquote, or they alleged
Yeah.
anyway.
A lot of, and in London, a lot of the enforcement, there were articles in the newspapers in the UK about how everybody was complaining that their Lamborghinis and Ferraris were now getting ticketed in London because these cameras were deployed. The code does not differentiate between vehicles that have been altered to be excessively noisy and vehicles that come out of the dealership being excessively noisy. This has been raised as a defense at hearings because people we have given summonses to Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and the comedian Tracy Morgan got a ticket for his Lamborghini because he was sitting in tunnel traffic in Manhattan, gunning the throttle while he was sitting in traffic, having a good time, gunning the throttle on his Lamborghini. And he got picked up by a camera and got a summons. The thing with vehicles that come out of the factory, and we have researched this and talked to the manufacturers, is that they almost all come with something that what Lamborghini, I think, at least calls an urban setting, which is for driving around in densely built up areas that mutes the exhaust. It's for slow traveling at slow speeds, and it mutes the exhaust. It's either Lamborghini or Ferrari calls it the urban setting. And it is meant to be used when you drive around in
I
Manhattan.
don't think anyone's going to be shedding tears for people driving Lamborghinis, but is your data showing that that the cars are what we think are souped up generally, other than the handful of people with Lamborghinis in New York City getting tickets?
We get a lot of cars that are from, 15 to 20 years old that are getting these summonses because they've been taken to shops and altered to be really noisy. Because the owner wants to be noticed when they drive down the street. They want to be heard, from 6 blocks away. So a lot of these vehicles are older vehicles that have been
West Avenue.
No, I
It's a full
understand.
board meeting, by the way, going on. You can come in though, it's okay. I'm not.
You're not needed. Needed. No, I understand. I understand that. I think we all seen, these cars that are souped up to do that, and I think that's a problem. But if you just have a 20-year-old car that would meet different standards, are those in general tripping this? Like, I don't know what the volume of a 20-year-old car is.
No properly functioning car should be this loud.
Got it.
If it's a normal car, not a $200,000 sports car. If it's this loud, it needs to go to the shop and be repaired.
I see.
And even those sports cars, they don't get that loud unless you do it on purpose. Like
You
when you're revving
usually
it up
have to
slightly.
con-
Yeah.
Is there, I'm sorry, one more question, apologies.
yeah.
There's no like first time free situation here, anything, right? Because
Well,
things do happen. People are stealing, I don't know what this piece is called, the catalytic converters, and I notice a lot of loud cars after they are stolen. I'm wondering if there's any allowance for that.
In other words, is there like a 0 penalty for a first violation if you remove the,
Well,
not currently?
I know mine was stolen, for example. Many people in my neighborhood's catalytic converters are stolen, and your car is very loud for 2 days until you can get it fixed.
Not currently. Currently, the first violation penalty is
So that's not a defense that someone's
880.
altered your car.
You were
What
driving,
was-
you were driving to the mechanic.
Driving to the mechanic is not a defense.
With what's the defense?
It's not a defense if you were driving to the mechanic.
To get because your catalytic
I wouldn't
converter
think so.
removed.
Have you had any,
There's only 9 cameras.
That's true.
Chances are slim.
have you had any
That's true.
difficulty with the respondent selected? Because I would imagine that you would be required to make it the registered owner. correct?
It goes to the ticket goes to the registered owner.
Then I could see someone coming in and saying I wasn't the person driving the vehicle.
The statute makes the registered
Owner
owner
responsible. that's what I
responsible. In
wanted to
fact, there
make
is somewhere in here in the stuff from Intelligent Instruments, they mentioned that they have, face blurring technology so that it is not possible to identify who's driving the car.
So I have a question just on the technology itself. So this is a London-based, a UK-based company.
Southampton, I think,
Right.
yeah.
So, and you have to send it back every year to
be
get it
calibrated.
right? What, there's no American companies that are making a comparable product
I
that.
think so.
Okay, because just thinking in terms of.
This
the
is-
cost
this
and
is-
the let of-
This is state of the art.
Okay.
This is where London is where this was pioneered. And we have a meeting actually tomorrow with folks from Boston because Boston is thinking about doing this. But it would be with this
Interesting.
equipment. This is state of the art. Intelligent Instrument stuff is the state of the art here.
Am I correct that it's not just vehicles that have performance or other enhancements? If you're blasting your music, it's going to pick that up also, correct? A lot of people ride through the neighborhood with their music blasting. So that's
Well, we'll get to that in a second because actually we anticipated using this only for noisy exhausts. But it has also come in really handy with enforcing the prohibition on horn honking. And for a very small number of cases, for excessively loud music coming from vehicles.
We can pull that slide up. It's like the first to last.
Yeah, it's the next to last slide.
There we go.
Subwoofer type.
Yeah,
That's what I-
so, yeah.
That's
So
the problem.
we've only issued like 41 tickets for music. But it wasn't something that we had originally sort of anticipated that we were going to be using this for. But the type of noise that sets it off, it doesn't really matter whether it's the exhaust or somebody leaning on their horn or somebody blasting music out of the speakers. It gets set off either way.
But it would have to be somebody leaning on their horn because of the way the sound is measured. It wouldn't just be a like one time.
Well, there are different standards for each of these sections. Horn honking, it is no decibel or other noise standard. It's just that you're not supposed to honk the horn unless as a sign of imminent danger. So if we have a camera at an intersection and the light is red and somebody is stopped at the light and they're sitting there leaning on their horn because they want the car in front of them to go through the light, this detects that. And we can review that. And if the video shows that they're honking the horn for no reason, we can issue a violation for horn honking.
Okay.
For the music, it has to be audible, plainly audible 25 feet or more from the vehicle. So since the cameras are way more than 25 feet away, if the video and the recording show that you can clearly hear music coming from the car with the red dot on it, we can issue a summons.
Russ, is that triggered at 85 dBA then for music as well?
It will only go off if if the music is exceeding the same level that we set it for
Right.
the exhaust. But the standard for a violation for that section is not a decibel level. It's
Right,
plainly
right.
audible more than 20.
I guess that's my question is, if it's plainly audible, that could be much lower than 85.
It can be, yeah.
But it won't get
Yeah,
captured.
yeah, if you can hear it, but it wouldn't be captured. It wouldn't set this off.
Right,
If
okay,
it's, we're only getting music when it's way louder
I see.
than plainly audible.
So it's not like a red light camera where when you go through red light, it automatically generates the ticket and sends it to you. You actually at DEP get the alert. that-
Now, we're setting these to go off
Uh-huh.
at at, we're giving them 9 decibels over,
Okay.
what's allowed in the code
Is it
before,
reviewed?
before the camera goes off.
And is it reviewed? So it's reviewed by somebody at DEP before the
Yeah,
summons goes
what we
out?
get is that the inspectors review kind of in the same way that they review the evidence that's submitted by citizen complainants.
Okay. Okay.
We review the evidence that we get from the system, and that consists of the stuff on the earlier slide with the video and the graph and the other stuff that tracks the time of the event and all of that other stuff that we need to be able to issue a summons.
Interesting. Keep catching the same guy.
So on payment, I mean, you know, with buildings type things, there's a motivation to pay your time so that that's not, you know, an encumbrance on your building. But here, is there any sort of mechanism to induce payment based
Yeah.
on driver
Well,
license?
I mean,
or
so-
registration?
Yeah, one of the problems, and I guess we could go, unless anybody has any questions about the stats on this slide. Obviously, it's been going up each year as we get more cameras. So you might, you know, if you extrapolate from this last year with 9 cameras, if we have 25, almost 3 times as many, you're probably going to be now seeing 3,000 or 4,000 a year of these violations. So, yeah.
I'm not without sympathy for OMB and their position, but if there was, it's truly a problem of game theory. If everyone decided to never pay their fines, we'd never have a proliferation of cameras.
Well, that's the last slide is,
I
what
wonder-
do we do if people aren't paying these things?
Well, I mean, if you substitute this violation for another one, it's not like we would stop, you know, enforcing something or creating if it was a violent crime so.
Yeah, so one of the issues is that these being noise code violations do not give us any authority to do any of the things that you can do to vehicles that violate other vehicular types of things. You can't suspend somebody's driver's license. You can't suspend their registration. You can't boot the vehicle. There's nothing you can do for noise code violations. So one idea that we're going to discuss is, and we've been told, and I actually inquired with Madeline about this, because there is in the charter a provision that allows certain kinds of violations that are issued by her department for the fines to be automatically docketable just based on mail service, I guess, where we don't have to, because serving these things, we don't use a process server. They're issued to individuals. And so basically the service on these is noise code service, which is by mail, which means that the judgments are not automatically docketing. So one of the things that we think we may want to try and do in order to improve collections is to seek, we were told we would need state legislation in order to get this added as a charter provision where these types of violations, the fines would be automatically docketable. Another thing that we've been discussing internally is this something that we could ask the board for a cease and desist order for on a vehicle? We ask the board for cease and desist orders on stationary equipment, something that doesn't drive around. And the remedy, if they don't comply with the cease and desist order, is that that stationary equipment can be sealed. how would that work with a car?
I see one infirmity with that, which is that we don't know who the operator of the vehicle is, so there could be some due process problem, or is it ultra virus? You know, do we have the authority? So, just fancy Latin. Can we
The
get rid
noise
of it?
code authorizes the board to issue cease and desist orders for equipment that is equipment or devices that are in violation of the code, and motor vehicles do fall within that definition.
So
I
it's
think
not
the
illegal
question
to
is
enter
not,
your
I
car,
think the
though.
question is just, how would it work?
Yeah,
There's no reciprocity with DMV on these?
Well, we've talked preliminarily to the police department. And the police department has said they would be willing to talk about, because the police department has lists of vehicles that they go around booting for unpaid tickets. And we have discussed with the police department, sort of just on an exploratory basis, the possibility that vehicles that if a cease and desist order was issued and they didn't show up for the hearing, could the vehicle be added to PD's list to be booted? But then that would raise issues of how do they get the boot off? You know, for unpaid tickets, they get the boot off by paying the tickets, which I think you can even do online now. For this, it's not, they're not getting a cease and desist order because they haven't paid the tickets. They're getting it because the vehicle keeps getting summonses for being too noisy. And the cease and desist order would require them to appear before a hearing officer. Would they have to show up at the hearing and have the hearing officer direct that the boot be removed from the vehicle? There are kind of a lot of issues with doing this
Well, when
for
you-
vehicles.
In the ordinary course for a noise code violation, like for this generator, when they had unpaid summonses, right, in that case. So when they show up for their hearing, in order, you know, with the evidence that they've corrected, but would they also have to pay all of their unpaid penalties?
Paying the
to-
unpaid penalties is again, not
Not something that.
typically part of what the hearing officer is looking at
Okay,
in terms of whether they've come into compliance.
okay.
Well, also, if it's a boot, they can't come in compliance because they can't remove the car. Unless
Well,
they
that,
can't
again,
come in.
they can't, again, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, if the vehicle's booted, it can't be moved and they can't take it to the mechanic to fix it.
But I mean, I
Oh.
really think that, I mean, compliance might just mean not gutting your engine, so it's.
I mean, the judge, I guess the hearing officer could direct that the boot be removed if they showed up at the hearing and said, I'm going to take it to the mechanic to get it.
They might not need to take it to the mechanic to avoid violating the code again.
Generally, the way that these vehicles are altered to be really loud, I think you'd probably have to take it
Oh, the ones that are.
to a
altered,
mechanic to get it,
But the
which is
Ferrari,
most of them.
you could just.
The Lamborghinis and the Ferraris are a small percentage.
Is it illegal to have your car altered? Right, it's not illegal to have your car altered,
Some
so,
ways, you
What-
can't have your car altered to have it to the.
well, they can drive to the middle of nowhere and have it be loud, where we're now making it, either they should make it illegal to have your car altered or not. Like, if we decided Big Brother's now watching you all the time, the city decided that, I think that's a horrible step forward, that we're under constant surveillance, but that's not my decision. And now we're even expanding the scope of this noise cameras to say, it was really for loud cars, but we're gonna follow you every time you make a noise, and no one wants noise in their neighborhood, myself included. I live in a noisy neighborhood, and with cars going down the street, no one likes it. But now we're having Big Brother watching you at all times, and frankly, you're making it much worse by expanding the scope of this. And I think it's a very bad precedent for us to be doing.
Russ, I think that gets to my point of the education efforts and the outreach. It seems that the public is not taking this seriously, right? That they just think, what is this? This complaint about my vehicle being loud? So my only point is because DEP may have You know, if you have the ability to let the public know, perhaps people will comply on their own. And then there's also the question of, there's one thing when a car is very loud in your neighborhood and you're trying to sleep because you have to get up at 5 o'clock to be to a board meeting by 9. But it's another thing when a car is on the highway, right? I thought I heard you say, it's less than 35 miles.
Yeah, these cameras will not be
Right.
deployed on.
So they won't be on the
highways.
highway, but I think that goes to what Matthew is saying. Imagine that a person fixes their vehicle so that they are not making this noise in these zones that are less than 35 miles per hour, but yet it's okay to have your vehicle this way if you're in another place that's more than 35 miles per hour. So I think there may be some issues down the road, but I suspect if the public is aware that, you know, just stop or just not, don't make this noise in these neighborhoods, then you might get some compliance. And that's, I imagine that's the ultimate goal.
In the same way that DEP did the Billy Doesn't Idle campaign around the idling, you know, they had a big public
Like, make it a
education
big
campaign
deal.
about idling, like this may be something where that's.
Which unfortunately does not appear to have deterred many people from idling
Well,
based on
Only
the
people who
number
are
of
from New York City
complaints
are
we get.
aware of that campaign.
Maybe that's fair.
I do feel that that I'm compelled to state for the record that it is not everybody that doesn't like the noise from these cars. Even some people who aren't driving them do enjoy hearing that noise because I live with one of them. But,
21?
yes.
So-
Not of driving age yet, but I do, you know, so it's probably a hobbyist or, you know, it's a certain, people who share certain interests do enjoy the noise as well as like very particular drivers. So I just,
Can I piggyback on that? I recollect an article from maybe a year or more ago about Lamborghini's electric vehicles being too quiet, and they've now added a soundtrack so that you can make them do exactly what this is intended to interdict. So I find the irony kind of wonderful. And then I have a question. Does the company have any data they can, have they shared with you about the potential for false positives or, you know, misidentifications?
I'm not aware, but I can,
Just an interesting question. I mean,
Yeah.
the annual calibration seems necessary, and if I were the attorney representing someone, I would probably bring up the accuracy or the correctness of the reading, probably in a losing effort, right?
I can find out. The only Article 78 that I think we've had on this subject so far is from I believe, a Ferrari or a Lamborghini owner on the grounds that this was the way the car was purchased, that it's New York State registers it and allows it to be driven on New York State roads, and therefore,
So.
it's allowed.
So that actually made me, your question about like, can you modify your car? You can do it up until the point at which you fail an inspection, you can't register your car. Is the way it's always been explained to me. I'm not mechanically adept.
So actually, one of the reasons, just to close this out, that we thought it would be a good idea to do this presentation this month is that there is in our air and noise unit a lot of talk about bringing a cease and desist request for one of these before the board. And so thought it would be a good idea to do this at this meeting, and there's a possibility that they may want me to if there's a case where somebody has been getting repeated violations for this, we may think about having you guys debate this at the next meeting if we decide to make a request, so.
We'll have to look into the legality there. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yes.
I'd like to just,
Yeah, no.
if people can make it just a few more short points. We have a lot more to discuss, so I do want to keep us to the agenda, but real quick.
Just one
Joseph,
thing to
and then-
handle, out-of-state vehicles. So when you say New York State registers, if I come from Florida, what happens then?
It would be sent to the registered owner in Florida.
Is it?
well, I just, based on the photo that you had of that one particular vehicle, I noticed that it appeared to be one of these four-wheelers, which I don't actually think are street legal. So
The
it's-
state, the VTL has different noise levels for vehicles over 10,000.
Right, my only question was whether there's been any sort of collaboration with the police department in identifying some of these non-street legal vehicles. That, I mean, at least in my neighborhood are the biggest offenders of the.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how PD does, if PD will like pull over people, when somebody like whizzes by them and it's really noisy. I don't really know how that, I don't know how that works on the PD level. Yeah.
Absolutely why not. But your question about the four-wheelers, those are not even legal in New York City. So,
That's what I'm saying is that.
so I wouldn't matter what level of noise it
They
made.
wouldn't have plates to get captured.
Oh, right, that's
Yeah,
true.
you wouldn't
Yeah,
expect
yeah. If there's no way to issue a summons to those folks. then.
Okay, well, I'd like it to keep us moving, but Russ, thank you very much for a very thorough presentation and for everyone's questions and hopefully that you've gotten some good feedback from everyone.
I think
as
we'll
you-
probably be talking about this again
Good.
in the future.
Okay, I'd like to call a vote to go into executive session. Yeah. Go ahead. Okay, I'd like to ask for a motion to move into executive session. All right, we have a motion and a second. I see a second. Thank
Are
you.
there any objections to the motion to go into executive session? Seeing none, hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously.
Okay. Please let us know when we can proceed. We are going to. Okay, we are back on the record and we are moving on to the agenda item, which concerns the adoption of a decision in DEP versus JNR Tours Limited, which is appeal number 2401556. The board has been presented with two alternative options, and the first is an appeal decision which applies the VTL decision, the VTL definition of school bus, and in applying that definition would reverse the JHO's decision and dismiss the summons. So I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt the appeal decision version that I just outlined. Okay, I see a motion. Second? Second, okay, we'll take a vote and then those in favor voting would be in support of that. And by extension, those who are not in favor, their vote would be deemed a support for for affirming the JHO's decision and not dismissing.
Okay, so it's affirming or reversing.
Yeah, so a vote in favor is a vote to support dismissing the summons, reversing the JHO's decision, and adopting the VTL definition for these purposes.
Okay, Commissioner Austin,
Yes.
Shamanda Graham,
Yes.
Joseph Gregory,
Yes.
Elizabeth Nauer,
Yes.
Madeline Legori,
Yes.
Russell Pacuni,
I'll abstain.
Harminder Palarana,
No.
Matthew Schneid,
Yes.
Thomas Bettner,
Yes.
Matthew Smith,
Yeah.
Lisa Urban,
Yes.
Jared Whittington.
Yes.
So that is 1, 2, 3. 10 in favor of dismissing, 1 abstention, and Douglas Swan is not here.
And one vote. No.
And I'm sorry, 1 vote no.
Right, okay. All right, thank you very much. We will proceed with the dismissal on appeal. Okay, does anyone have any other business to raise before we get into scheduling our next meeting? All right, possible dates for our next ECB meeting are the 3rd of April or the 10th of April. Does anyone have any concerns with either of those dates?
My preference is for the third, if no one cares.
Okay, any objection to the third? Seeing general agreement? All right, we will schedule our next meeting for April 3rd. Please stay tuned for the agenda and calendar information. Just a reminder again, everyone, to please sign the sign-in sheet, which we will keep at the front of the desk on the clipboard. And I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn today's meeting. The motion, the second, thank you very much.
Are there any objections to the motion to adjourn the meeting? Seeing none, hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much for your participation today, everyone. Meeting's adjourned.